If you've been sending your tax dollars to Baltimore County schools, then you may be in for a treat from last year. Good evening and welcome to Give Me a Break. I'm John the Carmody. If you live in Baltimore County and you've been sending hundreds of millions of your tax dollars to Baltimore schools, you might have realized that those kids trying to get the education were unknown because of the whereabouts. As we're about to show you, your money is going to the unknown whereabouts of a student. Maybe it might be your child or maybe somebody else. Here's Chris Papps.
Maryland Public Schools right now are busy, not just educating students, but counting them. In Maryland, most of a school's funding is based on the number of students enrolled on September 30th. The students counted on that one day largely determines a school's funding the following year. But a Project Baltimore investigation is raising serious questions about that process. We've learned in 2024, taxpayers gave hundreds of millions of dollars to schools to educate students who could not be found.
This is very concerning.
State Delegate Kathy Schlager represents Baltimore County. She's also a former public school teacher.
We need to do something to stop this problem.
In total, in 2024, more than 891,000 Maryland students were counted on September 30th. Throughout the year, according to the Maryland State Department of Education, about 14,500 students unenrolled in grades 7 through 12. The documented reasons students unenrolled range from illness to employment, but the biggest category by far is whereabouts unknown. Look at that number. Nearly 11,000 students were unenrolled because the school could not find them. But since the students were enrolled on paper on September 30th, the schools received your money to educate them for the entire year.
They don't even know where these kids are. Are they safe? Are there safety risks for these kids? Is it fraud?
According to state data, Maryland schools in 2024 received nearly $20,000 per student, meaning local and state taxpayers gave public schools statewide around $219 million in just 1 year to educate students whose whereabouts were unknown. And that amount does not include federal funding.
It's unacceptable for taxpayers' money to go for students that are knowingly not in the school system.
Funding missing students in Maryland is not a new problem. Project Baltimore first reported on the issue in 2021. But it is a problem that's getting much worse. In 2019, 6 years ago, the state reported just about 6,100 students whose whereabouts were unknown. Every year since, the number has increased.
Why are they continuing to increase the number of students they're putting in the category of whereabouts unknown to receive funding for students that clearly do not attend school?
Following our reporting on missing students in 2021, Carroll County Delegate April Rose introduced legislation to count students 4 times a year to increase accuracy. Opponents, such as the teachers union, said the bill overcomplicates a data snapshot that is intended to ensure adequate funding for schools.
There needs to be some course correction. Last year, the Maryland General Assembly passed the largest tax increases in the history of our state. And we're being told this is for education.
After speaking with Project Baltimore, Schlager sent these letters to Rick Henry, the Maryland Inspector General for Education, and Maryland Representative Andy Harris, requesting state and federal investigations into the funding of students who cannot be located. We'll keep you posted on any response. The data tell us the number of students whose whereabouts unknown has drastically increased. But why is this happening? And should taxpayers continue to pay to educate students who cannot be found? We plan to attend Tuesday's State Board of Education meeting in Baltimore, and we will ask those questions to Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Carrie Wright. We'll keep you posted. I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
So, what do I think needs to happen? I think taxpayers should have the right to know. Even the whole community of Baltimore County should know. I mean, Baltimore County should not be kept in the dark when it comes to educating your child. You as a parent pay your taxes for your child's free education. And shouldn't the whole community be involved about this? Absolutely. It shouldn't just take one person to build a fence and say, that's life. It takes one person to make a difference in your child's education. You can't just simply wave a magic wand and then simply say, look what I got here. We'll stay on this case, and we'll keep it posted on a future Give Me a Break. Remember Y2K 25 years ago, back in 1999? Well, when the millennium approached, we would be at a terroristic strike. But would we? Stone Phillips has a Dateline hidden camera investigation. Sorry, Dateline investigation. Please stay with us. Where's the beef? You thinking about getting a good steak for dinner tonight? Well, you better get out your wallet. You better save some money because the price of beef has just gone way up. And everyone's question in the mind is, where's the beef? Take a look.
We primarily raise grass-fed beef and pastured poultry, and we're all direct sales to customers.
It's that model Andrew Edlin says has kept his business from feeling the brunt of the beef industry's rising costs.
It allows the customer to understand where their produce or their food is coming from.
But just because he's been able to keep some costs down, that doesn't mean he hasn't also felt those bigger price tags.
5 years ago, I was able to sell you an entire cow, processed, ready to go for about $3,200. Now you can't even buy that animal in the field for $3,200. It's costing around $3,400, $3,500.
Edlin tells me much of the cost on his end stems from the national decrease in cattle. As of January 1st of this year, the beef cow population of the United States was only down 1% from the prior year. But even that small decrease has already sent beef prices up.
$2,000 in 5 years, where the past 50, 100 years, it never even cost $2,000 to send that, to buy or sell that animal.
There's also less beef being imported from Mexico.
It is coming to us. It's a devastating little pest, and so it's for sure going to affect people at the majority of farms and cattle raisers that don't see their animals on a daily basis.
But despite that shift, Edlin is optimistic that things could improve, but wants to make it clear to customers that they aren't alone in feeling the hurt of higher prices.
The price is hurting everyone, but I can't buy an animal for the same price that I was able to sell a packaged animal.
As mentioned last week, beef prices going into the holiday season are likely to go up. However, Edlin tells me that animals like these will likely not break the bank. Reporting in Alice, I'm your neighborhood news reporter, Adam Beam, for Chris 6 News.
Yeah, a turkey won't break the bank. Even if you were to go gobble, gobble, gobble for that good price. You probably won't even buy some turkey. Alright, check this out. There was a man climbing the Harbor Bridge. If you're trying to If you were driving on the New Harbor Bridge and you saw a man climbing, what would you do? Ignore it? Or be concerned about his safety and call someone for help? I'd probably just pull up to the side and help. If I was walking on the side, I'd say, "Oh, Henry, hey, sir, get down from there. I don't want you to get hurt." It happened on North Beach. And all those safety concerns are not detailed. So let's take a look at this.
Climbing up the cables of the Harbor Bridge isn't easy, and it's certainly not recommended. But a man was able to do so, sparking a potentially dangerous situation. I'm Alexis Scott, your North Beach Neighborhood News reporter, asking questions about safety after the man was rescued.
Nearly 3 months after the grand opening of the new Harbor Bridge, its safety features were put to the test. A man police say was having a mental health crisis was able to climb the bridge support cables. He made it hundreds of feet above traffic, a risk that could have turned deadly. I spoke with first responders about how they handle these situations.
We have to do training and we have to be prepared to respond to that. So fortunately for us, we had an idea about the bridge, long before it was even built. So even in the process of it being built, we were able to do training along the way.
Assistant Fire Chief Tony Perez says several fire stations were dispatched, particularly Station Number 3, which specializes in high-angle rescues. They also collaborated with Corpus Christi Police to bring the man down.
Anytime we're going to utilize ropes to accomplish a rescue, the Corpus Christi Police Departments, they call it the HNT, is the Hostage Negotiating Team. And a lot of people don't know, but annually our rescue team would train with them.
Now, the Harbor Bridge does have a 10-foot tall fencing across the shared use path, but that man was able to still cross the median.
After a couple hours, first responders were able to rescue the man. Corpus Christi Police Department says the man was taken to the hospital for evaluation, and no criminal charges will be filed. TxDOT, which owns the bridge, and Flatiron Jagatos, the builders, issued this statement in part. Flatiron Jagatos is reviewing Wednesday's incident with TxDOT to assess security measures and prevent the public breaches. It's still unclear exactly how the man successfully climbed up the cable of the bridge.
Corpus Christi police tell me they conduct after-action reviews. This determines what worked during the response efforts and what didn't. Near North Beach, I'm your neighborhood news reporter, Alexis Scott, Chris 6 News.
Welcome.
Okay. What the hell's going on? If you want new security measures, why not put why not put some electric on that wire? And then dumbass and then a monkey with Down syndrome on the spectrum be like climbing it and go electrocution. It's electrocution. That's how it's done. So you want to up your security? Put cameras in it on that bridge, or even better, make it like an electrical fence. You climb an electrical fence, you get a shock, or that's how it should be. Try to climb it, you get shocked. Or many people would try to find ways to break the shocking system. No one will know. Do you remember 25 years ago when Y2K happened? If you remember, when the new millennium approached Y2K was probably happening. But now it's an even bigger threat here. Terrorism. As we're approaching 2026, could we see another terroristic attack? What if terrorists do strike? Does it all have to lead? They don't all have to lead to the scandal of Monica Lewinsky. Stone Phillips investigates about not just terrorism, but one soil sample, and a plant, and one person. Please stay with us. Political terror would be one of those things. Many years ago, we were being advised to take extra precautions about threats of terrorism as the new millennium approached. What if terrorists did strike this year? Or what if it happened last year? Would we strike back? When the war of Iraq came in 2003, we struck back. And when Trump was president, terrorists probably struck. Probably strike at us, but we strike back. But was it the right one? Tonight, we're going to show you a Dateline investigation from back in December 1999, which included a political scandal, Monica Lewinsky, threats of terrorism. It's just something that a Hollywood screenwriter would dream up. But would it be a good movie? Or something, in fact, real enough that you can't even take it with a grain of kosher salt? Or try to buy a good turkey? Here's Stone Phillips.
What do you think would hold it off, Mr. Moss?
Nothing. I mean, you'd have to have a war.
You're kidding.
It seemed like a story right out of Hollywood's active imagination. Distract public attention from a presidential sex scandal by ordering up a make-believe war.
You want me to produce your war?
But in August 1998, 8 months after Wag the Dog hit the screen, some people were wondering if Wright wasn't imitating art. Right in the middle of his own sex scandal, on the very day Monica Lewinsky went back before a grand jury, President Clinton went on national television.
Today I ordered our armed forces to strike at terrorist-related facilities in Afghanistan and Sudan.
Administration officials said the cruise missile attack on this factory in Sudan had nothing to do with the sex scandal and everything to do with the bombings 2 weeks earlier of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. More than 250 people were killed. The president said he was trying to punish the alleged architect of the bombings, Osama bin Laden, and prevent another terrorist attack, which U.S. officials believed was imminent. They also believed that here at Al-Shifa Pharmaceuticals in Sudan, bin Laden's network was acquiring ingredients for a deadly new weapon.
The factory was involved in the production of materials for chemical weapons.
Though the Sudanese insisted this was a civilian pharmaceutical factory, senior U.S. intelligence officials said satellite photographs and other sources disputed that no medicine was made there, that the factory was patrolled by the Sudanese military and owned by Sudan's military-industrial complex, which they believed had links to bin Laden. But how definitive and how up-to-date was that information? A Dateline investigation, including more than 100 interviews on 4 continents, raises some disturbing questions. How much did administration officials really know about this target? Did they ignore the warnings of their own intelligence analysts? And as a result of the missile strike, did 2 terrorism suspects slip away before the FBI could question them? If this factory did not make medicine, as U.S. officials suggested, why did Dateline's Dr. Bob Arnott find all kinds of medicine, packing materials, and order forms when he reached the factory just 3 days after the bombing?
We have an order for Cipro, a common antibiotic, amoxicillin.
And if this was such a secretive facility patrolled by the Sudanese military, why had the Sudanese allowed an American who knew Bill Clinton personally to tour the plant earlier that year? And had you seen guards, this fortification he's talking about?
Oh, no. The plant had one security guard, and he was a civilian hired by the plant.
Arkansas businessman Bobby May is a Bill Clinton supporter who hopes to someday do business in Sudan. No guard dogs, no military presence.
No, just people running around in white lab coats, working in the plant, bottling, manufacturing medicine.
And if the plant belonged to Sudan's military-industrial complex, as the White House charged, it was news to this man. Salah Idris was born in Sudan, but is a Saudi citizen. He bought the plant 5 months before it was destroyed. Idris says he doesn't know what suspicious activity the U.S. may have observed before he bought the factory, but he insists he's a legitimate businessman who was running a legitimate business with nothing to hide. In fact, he kept his personal and corporate funds, $24 million, not in Sudan or a secret Swiss account, but in the Bank of America, where it was easily frozen by U.S. officials after they discovered he was the plant's owner.
It started with a mistake and it ended with a cover-up.
But the key to the government's case wasn't who owned the plant. It was the physical evidence gathered there. U.S. officials said a soil sample taken by a CIA operative contained IMTA, a substance used to make deadly VX nerve gas. But it turns out the sample wasn't taken inside the factory. It was taken across the street. IMTA doesn't usually travel through the air, so how did it get there? And the soil sample wasn't collected days before the bombing, or even weeks. 2 government officials told Dateline it was gathered in December 1997.
The information that they had, one, it was dated,
Two, it was scanty.
Richard Shelby, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, says what the CIA told committee members in private was not particularly convincing.
Aside from this one soil sample, is there anything else, any other evidence that ties this facility specifically to chemical weapons?
I'm not privy to it.
So what we're talking about is one soil sample collected outside of the plant 8 months prior to the missile attack and before Mr. Idris even owned the plant.
That's basically right.
Senator Shelby is a Republican and a staunch critic of the Clinton administration. But he isn't the only person who feels more evidence was needed before the missile strike was ordered. Analysts in the State Department and others in the CIA were also concerned. And the CIA analysts specifically asked for more soil samples.
I've never seen a single soil sample lead to an act of war against a sovereign nation with whom we have diplomatic relations.
Repeat it and confirm it.
Go back, do it again, thank you very much.
Milt Dearden is a former CIA station chief in Sudan and Afghanistan. He's been involved in soil sampling like the one taken in Sudan. And he has serious concerns about how the sample was taken and handled as it made its way to the lab.
You don't have to be Barry Scheck to say, well, wait a minute, we've got problems here.
The only administration official who agreed to talk to us on camera was Undersecretary of State Thomas Pickering, a respected, long-time diplomat. Pickering told us that after the embassy bombings in Africa, the U.S. could not afford to take the chance that Osama bin Laden would strike American targets with chemical weapons. Pickering considers the evidence against the factories compelling.
We believe the evidence we had was solid and clear.
And timely?
And timely.
But Pickering does not deny that intelligence analysts expressed concerns about the target before the missiles were launched.
How serious were their concerns?
They were serious enough to send a memorandum, and that was the reason that we looked very carefully at the evidence.
Senator Shelby says it came down basically to relying on one soil sample. Is that how you see it?
It came down basically to relying on a soil sample that had a chemical. The only association of that chemical known was with the production of a very serious, very lethal chemical agent.
While U.S. officials continue to stand by their single soil sample, they finally backed off their attempt to link the plant's owner, Salah Idris, to terrorists. After Idris retained some high-powered lawyers from the Washington firm Aiken Gump to represent him, the U.S. government decided last May to release his money, all $24 million.
After careful examination, it was concluded there was not sufficient evidence to maintain the freezing of those assets.
But there was sufficient evidence to bomb his plant.
There was evidence to bomb the plant, but it had nothing to do with Salah Idris or his associations, pro or con.
Well, the fact that the plant had changed hands since your soil sample had been taken, doesn't it become relevant, if not important, who owns the plant?
That was not known to us.
Shouldn't it have been?
Perhaps, but we are not all-knowing and omniscient.
But Salah Idris says they should have known more about his plant before they destroyed it, and he hired more than lawyers to hammer that point home. See the yellow markers on this scale model of the plant? Idris brought in respected environmental engineers and chemists who took soil samples at each of these spots and tested them for IMTA. Though it was the rainy season and evidence could have been washed away, the scientists say they didn't find IMTA in the soil or in the plant's septic pit, where they believed IMTA could have been preserved for many months.
Idris also agreed to allow United Nations investigators free access to his plant. The U.S. opposed to any such investigation, claiming the rain would have washed all traces of IMTA away. But it wasn't just the UN investigation that was blocked.
As we found out during our interview, Undersecretary Pickering personally ordered analysts in the State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research to stop working on a report said to be critical of the bombing. It was the same bureau that had questioned the evidence before the U.S. attack.
I said, are there any new items that I or the Secretary have to consider? Anything that we should have considered before the bombing that wasn't brought to our attention? And the answer was no.
It sounds like they were saying this was a mistake, and you didn't want to hear it.
It sounds like perhaps that's the case. On the other hand, we had heard it from them before.
There wasn't an effort to squelch dissent here.
I don't believe so.
But there's something else about this story hardly anyone has heard, something Dateline spent 4 months investigating. Astonishing as it might sound, before the U.S. missiles were fired, the country we were targeting for helping terrorists says it was about to turn over to the FBI 2 possible suspects in the terrorist bombings of those U.S. embassies in Africa.
They are involved in something fishy. They don't want to talk about it.
Qutb el-Mahdi is head of Sudan's External Security Bureau, their version of the CIA. We should tell you that as reporters, we took everything el-Mahdi said with an extra measure of skepticism, because the U.S. considers Sudan a state sponsor of terrorism and a pariah when it comes to human rights. And Sudan only stands to gain from the story you're about to hear. But much of what el-Mahdi told us as he opened his files checked out. He says these 2 men were arrested by Sudanese intelligence in early August 1998. They were observed casing the unstaffed U.S. embassy in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, and were picked up after they asked about renting an apartment across the street. According to el-Mahdi, the men had Pakistani passports, Afghani accents, and a list of known bin Laden contacts in Sudan. Shortly before the factory was destroyed, el-Mahdi says he notified the FBI and was making preparations to hand the 2 men over. But after the U.S. attack, he says that his government changed its mind and that he passed word to the FBI that the 2 men were being deported to Pakistan instead. Undersecretary Pickering confirmed that the U.S. knew Sudan was holding 2 suspects and told us that after they were sent to Pakistan, the U.S. conducted a full and independent investigation.
There was no basis to connect these gentlemen with or indict them for the bombing of the 2 embassies in East Africa.
So you have questioned these 2 individuals?
I can't tell you the exact investigative techniques used. I can tell you that I know the end result of the investigation.
The U.S. government has already charged 17 people in the embassy bombings, but the FBI is still searching for more conspirators. And a former U.S. official told us that FBI agents he has spoken to wanted very much to question these 2 men, but never got the chance. The field agents were described as frustrated. And based on documents el-Mahdi showed us and other reporting Dateline has done, you can understand why.
For example, the company the men listed as a reference on their visa applications to Sudan is the same company U.S. prosecutors have accused of helping bin Laden's men procure explosives, weapons, and chemicals. According to the passport documents el-Mahdi showed us, both men were in Kenya for about 3 weeks before the embassy bombing there. And quoting from notes taken during an interrogation, el-Mahdi told us that one of the men mentioned visiting a certain hotel in Nairobi.
That he went to Top Hill Hotel in Nairobi.
The Top Hill Hotel, el-Mahdi believes, is actually the Hilltop Hotel. And what's so interesting about that? Well, according to U.S. prosecutors, the Hilltop Hotel in Nairobi is where Osama bin Laden's men stayed while plotting their attack on the U.S. Embassy. Did 2 possible suspects slip away? Is el-Mahdi telling the truth? We can't say for sure, but we did independently confirm that 2 men using those names and passports were in Nairobi before the embassy bombing. We also tried to track them down in northwest Pakistan. We didn't find them, but it's worth noting that our man says he was told to stop asking questions and get out of town if he valued his life. 16 months after the attack, it's not just people in Sudan who still wonder whether U.S. missiles were hurried into the air, at least in part, to bump another story off the front page.
The timing is still disturbing to me, troubling. Certainly, this attack helped change the media stories for the rest of the week or the next 10 days.
Senator Shelby was not in the position of the President of the United States.
Unfair to raise those kinds of questions?
Perfectly fair to raise those questions, but I hope perfectly fair to hear not only the answers, but the circumstances under which, in fact, that decision was made.
What would it have cost to take another week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to collect more soil samples,
we had
to
just
take more satellite
been
photographs?
Through the killing of 250 people, along with a number of our citizens, employees, and friends. It was not, in my view, either responsible or reasonable given the evidence we have, for us to take more time.
Today, Salah Idris's factory serves as a propaganda shrine, marking what many in Sudan consider an act of American terrorism. Idris says it bothers him that Sudanese leaders are exploiting this for political purposes. The real losers, he says, are the impoverished people of Sudan who need the medicine his factory produced. He believes the U.S. should pay to rebuild the plant and be more careful where it fires its missiles.
They have a legitimate right to go after terrorism and to fight terrorists, but they have to have the right targets. No mistakes.
Salah Idris says he is considering suing the U.S. government for damages, and he has hired one of America's top constitutional lawyers, Lawrence Tribe, as his attorney. If he does rebuild his factory, it won't be at its old location. Sudan plans to turn the site into a national monument. MSNBC has also done some groundbreaking work on this story. You can find those reports on our website. The address is dateline.msnbc.com.
Wow. Leads you to believe that, you know, we could be on another attack next year. But we won't know for sure. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Remember buying a car years ago and wondering, is it a really safe car? Well, you probably won't even find the answer until you realize how well your car did in a crash test. Years ago, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety conducted its own crash test like the government did many years ago. So before NHTSA, the government ran its own crash test and said, this is what was best. What you're about to see all this week, we're going to be focusing on those crash tests. The whole reason why is to ensure that your car can be the is and was. So tonight we're going to show you the results from many years ago that probably passed the test or failed the test. It could be your car, it could be your son's car, your daughter's car, your uncle's car, your nephew's car, your aunt's car, your friend's car, your neighbor's car, your old teacher's car. Whatever car you got, it may pass the test or it may not. Here's Lee Thompson.
Ryan O'Neill.
Very well.
Ryan O'Neill heads up the nonprofit Insurance Institute. It's funded by large auto insurance companies whose goal is to make cars safer.
Why would the insurance companies care so much that they would fund this multi-million-dollar building?
We are trying to push car design so that they are better, so that there will be fewer injuries, fewer claims, fewer medical bills, which will benefit us all.
There's no doubt new cars today are safer than ever. Automakers have made vast improvements. Seatbelts and airbags are saving lives. But as you'll see tonight, some cars may not be as safe as you think.
The Institute says with belts and airbags working, now it's time to focus on crippling leg injuries.
I hit the brakes real hard, but it was too late.
Donald Fazenbaker was in a head-on crash in December. A few years ago, he might have been killed. Now seatbelts and an airbag saved his life. But there's more to his case.
This is the bottom of his right foot. He had a fracture of his heel bone.
Dr. Andrew Burgess was the trauma surgeon on duty.
He had a fracture in the ankle joint right here. He had a fracture in the middle of his tibia or shin. His knee had no major injury. And between his knee and his hip joint, his thigh bone was fractured in several places. So he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 injuries between the central part of his body and his foot.
And his other leg, it was severely broken too.
I had a skin graft on this leg. The bottom part of my body wasn't protected.
And because injuries like Donald's keep happening, the Institute wondered whether the government safety test tells the whole story.
This is the government's crash test.
For more than 20 years, the government has been crashing cars like this, straight on into a wall. A good way to test airbags and seatbelts.
You see the bags working very well, the dummies, the movement is well controlled.
This car passes the government test.
Passes it with flying colors.
The problem, O'Neill says, more than half of all real-world crashes don't happen that way. Walk through any junkyard and you'll see cars that hit off-center. And if you test that way, like the Institute is doing, in a way the government doesn't, the results can be alarmingly different. Once again, this is how the government test looks.
This is the same car you just saw in the government test in our test, the Mitsubishi Galant. Look at the difference in its performance.
Incredible.
All of the cars are doing well in the government test now, but they're not all doing well in this test.
What's the difference? In the government's test, the force of the crash is absorbed evenly across the full front of the car. In an off-center crash, or offset as it's known, the force is concentrated on just one side. O'Neill says although these pictures look shocking, the worst injury in this offset crash was not what you actually see. Once again, the seatbelt and airbags help protect the head and chest, but the impact drove the foot pedal area, the footwell, 12.5 inches back toward the dummy's legs and feet. The Institute says if this dummy had been a real person, he would not have walked away. At least one leg would have been broken.
In the offset collision.
And it's not just the Institute that is concerned. One of the world's most respected automakers has been warning for years that without offset testing, the government's program is flawed. Tom Beluga is a safety engineer for Mercedes-Benz.
In an offset impact, you would have much more movement rearward because you're doubling the crash energy on the side of the vehicle that's impacted. And that was jamming rearward, causing injuries.
In fact, even this U.S. government study obtained by Dateline suggests if you are wearing a seatbelt, offset collisions produce a higher likelihood of serious to fatal injuries than full frontal crashes.
But the government doesn't require offset crashes, so up until now, consumers had no way of knowing which cars will put you in that kind of crash. The Insurance Institute is starting to change that.
Dateline was invited to watch the first ever set of comparative offset crash tests. Dummies are precisely positioned in the cars. A special grease paint is applied, different colors for different parts of the body.
This way we can tell where shin impact was on the dashboard.
Connections to more than 24 data channels inside the dummy checked and double-checked. A computer will record the forces on the head, chest, and legs. This computerized arm will measure exactly how much the driver's compartment is crushed, how much the footwell is driven into the legs. The Institute bought the brand new cars right off dealers' lots. Each car will be tested at the same speed, the same angle, the same conditions. Dateline had no say in how the cars were chosen, tested, or evaluated. The car being tested, the 1995 Volkswagen Passat.
What are the legs looking like? They're a little high.
The Institute's high-speed film shows what happens in a test designed to simulate two cars colliding in an offset crash at about 38 miles an hour.
The C-tracks failed. You can't see the right foot.
The footwell area near the pedals is driven 14 inches back toward the dummy's legs.
One bad leg?
Yeah.
So it's a real bad left leg result.
The numbers indicate a high risk the left leg and ankle are broken. This car, the new Chrysler Cirrus, meets government standards and is Motor Trend magazine's Car of the Year.
3, 2, 1.
The Chrysler Cirrus was one of the worst performers.
As you watch the slow motion, remember, this test is designed to simulate a real-world crash at 38 miles an hour. The seatbelts and airbag protect the head and chest, but what you can't see is the damage to the legs.
The center console has come over on the right side of his right foot.
The dummy is trapped, and the computer readings indicate high risk that both legs are broken. We took the Cirrus offset test to the man in charge of the government's crash testing program. Dr. Ricardo Martinez heads NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
This crash caused the footwell to move in 15.5 inches. And the dummy appears to have broken legs and broken feet.
Correct, and that's a real problem with real-world crashes.
Which would lead people to wonder, why doesn't the government do offset testing?
Well, we're very concerned about it. We think it's an important issue. We applaud the Insurance Institute for doing this sort of test. We think it's an important test. We just don't have the money right now to do that.
But it's not just whether the government should be doing a new test. The Institute's findings raise questions about whether the information the government is handing out about the test it already does is misleading.
That foot looks in a very bad position.
Every year, NHTSA releases a list, like this, rating car safety. The more stars, the safer the car.
5 stars is the highest you can get in our ranking system. It means that given that category of car, that it is the, quote, safest car and the one that performed the best.
I'm quoting from your own guidelines here. 5 stars means a 10% or less chance of serious injury.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Let's look at one of your 5-star cars, the Ford Contour.
But that's interesting. You notice that because of that offset, there's a little bit of motion this way.
Dateline showed Dr. Martinez the Institute's offset crash test and its analysis of what happened.
Performed very poorly, major intrusion. If you look at the footwell here, you see it's actually tearing and ripped apart in there.
Tell me realistically, what would happen to somebody's feet if they were in this car?
But this is a crash where someone could not walk away. This is a crash where you'd have major injuries, breaks, dislocations to both legs, both feet.
This car gets 5 stars on the government's test.
That's misleading. This car is not that good compared to other similar cars.
Is the government's 5-star system in this case misleading?
Well, again, we think we can do better. There were low extremity injuries and one that we have not taken into account in the star rating. The rankings for the 5 stars are based upon the head and chest criteria.
But consumers don't know that.
No, they don't.
I assume that means my whole body, not just my head.
Well, that would be a wrong assumption, wouldn't it? I mean, right now we're looking at head and chest, but what this car test shows is there's more at stake than just your head and chest. Buddy, are you ready? Yes, I am.
So is it possible to produce cars that do well in both tests? The Institute says it's not only possible, it's found several cars that already do.
Clear the runway.
The 1995 Ford Taurus gets high marks in the government's test, and it passes the Institute's test too.
Safety cage is held together very well.
The dummy's head and chest aren't injured, and neither are the legs.
They're good numbers. Much better than most of the cars tested so far.
And it isn't just Ford. Although General Motors sent us a letter saying designing vehicles to perform well in the Insurance Institute's test could increase the risk of head and chest injuries, one of its did well in the offset test. Watch what happens when the Institute tests a GM car that also has the best possible rating from the government.
This is the Chevy Lumina, one of the best performers. Look at the difference. Very little intrusion in the footwell area. This was one of our standout cars.
Proof, O'Neill says, that cars can protect the head and chest and the legs. Tomorrow, the Institute will release a full ranking of all 14 cars it tested, based on structural damage to the car, how much the dummy moved, and injuries. 3 cars are rated good in the offset crash test overall: the Chevy Lumina, the Ford Taurus, and the Volvo 850. The Institute ranks 4 cars as acceptable: Toyota Camry, Subaru Legacy, Honda Accord, and the Mazda Millennia. 1 car, the Saab 900, gets a marginal rating. 6 cars get an overall rating of poor from the Institute: the Mitsubishi Galant, the Chevrolet Cavalier, the Chrysler Cirrus, the Volkswagen Passat, the Nissan Maxima, and the Ford Contour. But listen to this. According to the government's rating system, those 3 cars got high safety ratings, 4 and 5 stars. But in all 6 of the cars the Institute calls poor in the offset test, if the dummy had been a person, he would have had a broken leg or a broken foot.
There's some cars that are doing well in the government's test, very well in the government test, that are just doing disastrously in this test.
If companies were to start to design cars to pass your test rather than the government's test, would that make cars less safe in a strictly head-on collision?
Not necessarily so, but it would be a mistake if they did that. They should be designing their cars to do well in both tests.
What do the automakers have to say? Well, the companies that make all 6 of the cars rated poor declined to comment on camera, most saying they needed more time to study the results, and that it's a mistake to read too much into one crash test. Ford and Chrysler wrote us that the test speed was too high. Ford said the Institute is not impartial, and Chrysler said it ought to be up to the government to set testing standards. GM said damage to cars doesn't always mean injury, and there was too much emphasis on broken legs, not enough on its top priority, protecting the head and chest. And finally, the automakers stressed these points. They care about safety, have made huge investments to try to ensure it, and none of the test injuries was life-threatening. We should note, however, that despite their criticisms, the automakers all told us they're either studying or currently conducting their own offset.
They could be conducting their own, or they're
Ian
probably,
O'Neill heads up the nonprofit.
probably not. So, when we come back, we're going to look into one more of these reports. And like I said, and before we go on break, I'm going to let you know all this, I'm going to remind you, all this week, crash test week. Today, Wednesday, and Friday, we're looking into crash tests. And like I said before, I had promised you Marco Lewinsky. We're going to have them for you in a future broadcast. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Tonight we're going to be starting a new week here on Give Me a Break as we continue to start season 9. If you saw Dateline reports from years ago all about crash tests, it's called an offset test, similar to the government's. At 30 miles per hour to a flat wall, a good test, but a different kind of crash test is from the IIHS, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, headed by Brian O'Neill. In that test, it goes high speeds at over 30 miles per hour, faster than the government's, and too fast, according to some automakers. So all this week, we will be focusing on these tests that used to be your car. Now you might be asking me, well, are we going to look at some from today's? Well, it may take 1 or 2 weeks, so maybe so. We could be doing 1 or 2 weeks, so for the next couple of weeks, this week, next week, so maybe so. So for now, what we're going to be focusing on is these collision courses and side impacts. Pretty soon we're going to be looking at SUVs and those pickup trucks. And even those four-wheel drive trucks. Once again, here's Lee Thompson.
It was a dramatic test. The first of its kind. A new way to measure safety.
This occupant compartment is not held up very well. You can see that. There's a major buckle here.
Last spring, Dateline cameras took you behind the scenes at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety.
You can see how his foot is jammed up there, that left foot.
It's funded by large auto insurance companies. Its goal, to make cars safer. In this case, by conducting America's first ever series of so-called offset crash tests. A crash test very different from the kind the U.S. government does.
This is the government crash test. You see the bags working very well.
Brian O'Neill heads up the Insurance Institute. This car passes the government test.
Passes it with flying colors.
In the government's test, the force of the crash is absorbed evenly across the full front of the car. But in the Institute's new test, it's concentrated on one side, just like many real-world accidents. The results can be alarmingly different.
This is the same car you just saw in the government test and our test. Look at the difference.
Incredible. Last spring, Dateline showed you how some popular new cars could pass the government safety standards, but fail the Institute's new test. One of the cars, the Ford Contour.
You see it actually carrying the risk of starting there?
Although there were no serious injuries to the head or chest, the Institute said the Contour did a poor job of protecting the driver's legs.
This is a crash where someone could not walk away. This is a crash where you'd have major injuries, breaks, dislocations to both legs, both feet.
But one of the best cars was also from Ford. The top-selling Taurus.
Safety cage is held together very well.
But since the original round of crash tests last spring, Ford has introduced a totally redesigned Taurus, with styling more like the Contour, and sales projected at more than 400,000 cars this year. The question, in a crash, how will the new version of America's best-selling car measure up? Dayline cameras are behind the scenes again, as experts from the Institute prepare the new 1996 Taurus. The dummy's precisely positioned. Grease paint applied to mark where the dummy hits.
Move it to the IVAS B port on the Motec roof.
Computerized sensors checked and double-checked.
The IDAS is now armed.
All to try to tell how well you would be protected if this car crashed into another, both of them going about 38 miles an hour. Remember, Dateline had no say in how the Taurus was chosen, tested, or evaluated.
3, 2, 1.
On the outside, the styling may look like the Contour,
We're seeing the beginnings of buckling and bending here.
but underneath, its structure proved just as sturdy as the old Taurus.
It's going to be a good rating overall, though. No question.
Watch again, this time through the Institute's slow-motion cameras.
The major damage is confined to the frontal area of the car. That's where you want the damage to be contained. You don't want the damage to extend into the occupant compartment. And all in all, this car performed outstandingly in the test.
The only weakness? The Institute says the Taurus's headrests don't lock, increasing the risk of whiplash in a rear-end accident. In a written statement, Ford told us all of its cars meet or exceed all federal standards, that the company is incorporating offset crash tests in its design program, but that it's important to take a comprehensive approach to crash testing instead of relying on a single test. Tomorrow, the Institute will release a new list of the 16 mid-sized cars it has tested so far, ranking them from good to poor. The car at the very top, the new 1996 Ford Taurus. For detailed crash test information about all 16 mid-sized cars, foreign and domestic, tested by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Crash Test, Box 1420, Arlington, Virginia, 22210. The information is free.
That information was free before you can get them on the internet. So before that, you had to write out that address or just on the internet. Sorry about that. Just type in results crash test of your choice, and it may cost you money or we may get it for free, depending on one of the two. I'm gonna have my final say on this when we come back. Stay with us. This is something to think about. Would you ever think about trying to get your girlfriend back? By either thinking of something or trying to watch The Notebook. Or even have your dad be ashamed of you, of your little sister trying to help you out. In tonight's Final Break, we looked at, a few times ago, we looked at Saucy TV, Pierre, Al Dente, Marco Jr., Linda, Nikki, Donna, Al Dente. Well, tonight's Final Break, with 2.1 million views back in May of 2005. Christina broke up with Pierre because of some drama that happened. I probably won't know, but all Linda wanted to do was try to help out. Take a look.
Dude, are you watching The Notebook? You need to get over her. This is ridiculous.
Okay, well, maybe if you stop bringing your hair and rubbing it in my face, it would be easier.
Dude, I'm trying to help you win the breakup.
What does that even mean?
Obviously, whoever cares less wins. You need to
That's
learn
right.
that.
Okay, well, what else?
You should date one of her friends. That's what I never did, but you should do that. Yeah.
I don't like any of her friends, though.
Okay, so then just go through her following, look at all her girl followers, and like 4 or 5 of their pictures.
Oh my god, you really are evil. What the fuck are you watching? I was looking for Goodfellas.
Wait.
Football.
Wait. He's cute. Swipe right.
Yeah.
Swipe right.
Wait, you didn't answer him. Marco, what are you doing here?
I'm just grading my game. Sounds like you're doing fine, but I don't care if it's date's night anyway.
Yeah, okay, with who?
Listen, all you need to know is she's a cute redhead, a great cook, and I'm going to dinner at her house right now.
Yo, you going right now? Can you get me a 4 for 4? 4 for 4.
Fun on your date with Wendy.
Marco's cover was blown. You gotta love Pierre.
Well, look who's here. Yeah, I woke up today feeling a little bit better, and I think I'm gonna be okay.
Christina posted a guy on her story, and he's hot.
Don't fucking lie to me. Show me.
Look, right here. See for yourself.
Dude, that's her dad.
Yeah, well, he's still hot. That's weird. Who said that?
Well, look who's
Yo,
here.
mama. Wow. Alright. That's all for this edition of Game Break Monday going on Tuesday. We'll see you again for Game Break Wednesday as we continue Crash Test Week. Follow us here at YouTube and give me a break. Stop bullying, speak up. Concentration, not strength. No jaywalking. Take care of yourself and each other. Now and always, I'm here for you. Always remember this. Autism is not a disability. It's your superpower. Good night.